Side effects and risk. Relatively speaking, creatine is felt to be very safe as a supplement for healthy adults in general, and specifically from the standpoint of maintaining muscle as we age into our 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. At higher doses, the most common issues are generally gastrointestinal in nature: bloating, cramping, diarrhea. Not usually dangerous, but not a heck of a lot of fun either. But here's something that can happen as a risk in the ER, or it can happen in various clinical settings as well. And it's not insignificant. And I'm talking about lab interpretation. When you take supplemental creatine, your body breaks it down into creatinine, which is the most common marker that we use to measure kidney function. So if you're taking megadoses of creatine, your blood work may look like your kidneys aren't functioning well, even if they're perfectly fine. And that can cause confusion, especially if you're on other medications that happen to affect the kidney. In fact, if you're being seen in the ER for an episode of food poisoning, chest pain, abdominal pain, or any condition where blood is being drawn and your labs come back showing that your creatinine level is high, no one is going to want to send you home. And you could find yourself being admitted to the hospital to figure out what the heck's going on, when in reality, your kidneys may be just fine. So one of the risks of megadosing or supplementing with creatine in general is the real potential for creatine to muddy the waters where interpretation of your kidney status is concerned, and leading to unnecessary hospital admission and a potentially expensive medical workup. One possible remedy to this is something called cystatin C. It's a filtration biomarker test that's now being used in some clinical settings as an alternative to looking at creatinine levels, and it can give some clarity as to whether kidney malfunction is present. But unfortunately, as of 2019, only about 7% of all U.S. clinical laboratories had the ability to do that type of testing, and the availability is still relatively limited. So for now, measuring creatinine as well as something called eGFR remains the primary way most doctors evaluate kidney function. So what does this all mean to you, practically speaking? It just means this: if you're being sent by your doctor for lab work, or you happen to find yourself in the ER for a medical issue, you need to let people know that you're supplementing with creatine, and especially if you're taking higher than normal doses, so that your lab work can be interpreted through an accurate lens of what's going on. Multiple comments on this last video make it very clear that many people don't believe doctors have much knowledge regarding sports supplementation, and the reality is maybe that's true. So unfortunately, if you're going to supplement with creatine, you're in the driver's seat. And it's important for you to understand how creatine affects the picture it may create with your lab work in a medical environment, particularly where your kidney numbers are concerned. So is megadosing creatine worth it? For muscle strength, I'd have to say no. You're not going to get more muscle benefit by megadosing once your muscles are saturated. For the brain, maybe. There's some interesting research, especially in sleep deprivation and possibly in older adults, but it's inconsistent. And it's not enough yet to say that this should be routine for all of us. For most of us in our 50s, 60s, 70s, and even older, sticking with 3 to 5 grams per day isn't unreasonable. That transfers proven benefits, better strength and power, and muscle preservation as we age, and that's where 99% of the evidence lies at this point in time. If someone really wants to experiment with higher doses, I'd suggest keeping closer to what's actually been studied, like 10 to 20 grams per day, short term, and not 40 grams indefinitely. Split the dose into smaller amounts to reduce stomach upset and GI issues. Stay well hydrated, and see a doctor if you're on multiple medications or have health issues before trying this. Big picture, megadosing creatine is interesting, but it's still experimental. It may or may not be the magic bullet that some online conversations make it sound like, but it's one of those topics that's getting a lot of attention because of some very promising and hopeful findings. If you've heard about megadosing creatine, or maybe you've even tried it yourself, I'd love to hear about your experience. Drop a comment below, and if you missed this last video covering a little history about creatine, check it out. Thanks for watching.